The first question is, on a deeper level, thinking of Arunachala means self-attentiveness. However, did Bhagavan specifically talk about the power of just the thought of Arunachala? Would thinking about the external form of Arunachala from anywhere in the world be equally helpful for the aspirant?
Yes, certainly. I mean, Bhagavan, that is, many of the verses of Akṣaramaṇamālai can be understood on two levels. We can understand it from the perspective of Anya Bhava, where we take Arunachala to be something other than ourselves. And also from the perspective of Ananya Bhava, when we recognize that he is I, he is what is shining in our heart as I. Both levels of meaning are implicit in so many verses, and sometimes they're very explicit. For example, there is a verse that Bhagavan once wrote under a picture of Arunachala. Karuna Nabamai Karudakkatinal Arunachala Shiva Midam. That means this is Arunachala Shiva. He wrote this under a picture of Arunachala, so he's talking particularly about the form of the hill. This is Arunachala Shiva, which Karuna Nabamai, being the ocean of grace, Karudak Gatinal, Karudak, when thought of, Gatinalhu, bestows liberation when thought of. So this is Arunachala, which being the ocean of grace bestows liberation when thought of. So Bhagavan is clearly referring there to the outward form of the hill. And there's so many verses where he's both referring to the hill, and I mean, he's deliberately referring to it at two levels. We can interpret it two levels, but we can't deny either level. We can't deny but in these verses, he's talking about the external form. We can't deny, but he's also talking about the internal form, the true form of Arunachala, the Swarupa of Arunachala. So both meanings are applicable. By thinking of the external form of Arunachala, that external form of Arunachala has the power to draw our mind within. So how this works, as Bhagavan says, it cannot be understood. Bhagavan begins Arunachala Ashtakam by saying, Ari Varu Giriyana Amadarum. It stands as an insentient hill. When he says it stands as an insentient hill, he implies it stands as if an insentient hill. Obviously, Arunachala is not a sentient hill, but in our view, it seems to be just a hill of rock. It seems to be just an insentient hill. Amma, Adisayan, Idinsale, Arivaridakam. Amma means mother, but in this context, it's an exclamation of wonder. Amma, it's action, meaning the action of its grace is Adisayan. It is wonderful, preeminent. Arivaridakam. It is very rare or very difficult for anyone to understand. That is, our mind cannot adequately understand the working of grace. But grace is working through this outward form of Arunachala. This outward form of Arunachala is a very special form because it has this power to turn our mind back within. That's why in the very first verse of Akṣaramaṇamālai, Bhagavan begins by saying, Arunachala mena ahameinine pava ahatebe rarupaya Arunachala. Arunachala, you eradicate or root out the ego of those who think of you in the heart. But that it has a double meaning there, because ahame can mean in the heart. It can also mean only I. Those who recognize but Arunachala Arunachala alone is I, or but Arunachala is I itself. Those who think that roots out the ego. So Bhagavan very clearly and intentionally gives room for these verses to be interpreted at two levels. And both levels are true. Both levels are applicable, because Arunachala has this outward form of Arunachala is endowed with a special power to draw our mind back within. Earlier, I had discussed the meaning, when I was discussing the meaning of the first verse, I discussed also the meaning of verse 10 of Arunachala Patikam, in which Bhagavan very clearly says, Patanam Pudumai, Vivali Kanta Paravatam. I have seen, Pudumai means something new, but in this context, it means something extraordinary, something wonderful. I have seen something wonderful. What is that? Veer Bali Kanta Paravatam, the magnetic hill, but forcibly attracts the soul. Paravatam means the hill, so he's particularly referring to this external form of the hill. But what is the nature of the external form of the hill? What is the action about the how does this external form work? He says, Oru Tarum Idane Otidum Werin Shesteye Oduki. That means subduing or curbing the activity, the mischievous activity, the mental activity of the soul who thinks of it even once. So if you think even once of this hill, Arunachala will begin to work from within, curbing the sheste, the outward going activity of the mind. And then what he will do, Oru Tanadu Abhimukam Aha Etu. That means drawing to face itself the one. Itself the one means Arunachala is the one. One can also mean peerless. So he is the one peerless reality, the one and only reality, the peerless, unequaled reality. Since he says he is the one, it's not a matter of one thing. When he says Tanadu Abhimukam, that means to face itself. That implies Tanadu could be referring to ourself. It can also be referring to Arunachala. It can give both meanings. But in this context, because Arunachala is ourself, so it is not a matter of one thing facing another thing. It is we facing ourselves is the implication, because he is one and one without a second, one and indivisible. So pulling the mind inwards to face itself. Ade Tanbol Achalamadu Sedu, making it motionless like itself. That is Arunachala. Achala means motionless or unmoving. So making the soul or the mind motionless like itself. So how does he make it motionless? By drawing our attention inwards to face itself. To the extent to which our attention goes inwards, the outward running activity of the mind is curbed, is subdued, and the mind sinks back into the heart and becomes motionless like Arunachala. And then he says, Ab Inwe Bali Kolum. He takes that sweet soul as bali. Bali means food that is offered in sacrifice. And when he says that sweet soul, sweet there implies it is when the soul is matured by his first putting that thought of him in our mind. But having put that thought of him in our mind, he begins to subdue the outward going activity of the mind. He draws it back within to face himself alone. He thereby makes the mind motionless like himself, and then he feeds on it. That is, Bali column, taking a Bali means he takes it as a sacrificial offering. So we sacrifice ourselves to him, he swallows us, is the implication. And then he says, if then, that means, what is this? That implies, what a wonder is this? And then he ends this verse by saying, or to remin. That means, be saved by thinking, we are souls. Thinking what? adanil oli iv we koli Arunamagiriye. Be sorry by thinking of this great Arunagiri, this great Aruna hill, the killer of the soul. We koli. If we koli, this great Aruna hill, the killer of the soul, adil oli, who shines in the heart. So is he here talking about the external form of the hill? Certainly, because he begins by saying it's a magnetic hill that forcibly attracts the soul. But he ends by saying it kills the soul and it shines in the heart. So Arunachala exists both within as our own real nature and externally as the form of this hill. But his existing in our heart is his swarupa, his real form. His external form and his real form work in conjunction to draw our mind within and to, so that he can feed upon us. So there is no doubt about the power of thinking about the external form of Arunachala. But how that external form of Arunachala works by drawing our mind inwards to face his real form, which is that which is shining in our heart as I. So Bhagavan deliberately gives room for many verses to be interpreted at two levels, because Arunachala is working in two levels. He's working both outwardly through that external form and inwardly in our heart. And how is he working? He's working without working. He's doing without doing. He's doing everything that needs to be done without doing anything, just by being as he is, because the very nature of his being is grace, is infinite love. So by his mere being as he is, by his Sanadi Visesha Matratala, as Bhagavan describes it beautifully in the 15th paragraph of Nana, by the mere special nature of his presence. His presence means his being. By just being as he is, he does all this. So Arunachala does everything without ever doing anything. Doing without doing. That means just being as he is, he draws our mind back within. So yes, definitely, Bhagavan, there's no doubt about the power of the external form of Arunachala. Bhagavan has indicated it in so many ways in Arunachala Stuti Panchakam.
So the next question. In this path, we are seeking liberation, and in order to gain it, there are a number of obstacles, and we have to conquer our Vishaya Vasanas and our will. I do feel my mind driving outside to seek experiences, phenomena, and I'm more aware of it now, but I feel my will is still strong, my understanding that I'm doing this, or I should be doing this, or I have this and that, all connected to my will. How can I weaken this will, make it subdue to Arunachala? Thank you.
That is, the will in its grosser form is what we call likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and so on. These are what constitute the will. But the seeds that give rise to all these likes and dislikes and so on are what are called Vishaya Vasanas, the inclination of the mind to go outwards towards Vishayas. So it boils down to the Vasana. What the will essentially is just the totality of all our Vasanas. And whose Vasanas are they? What is the root of all these Vasanas? It is ego, because the Vasanas are like the leaves and branches. The root is ego. Bhagavan also indirectly compares the Vasanas to an enemy army. The commander-in-chief of the enemy army is ego. That is, we ourselves are the enemy. We ourselves as ego are the enemy. Our real nature is what we actually are. So the enemy, the commander-in-chief is powerless without his army. Even the most powerful general in the world, it loses all his power if his army is defeated. So the ego, the ego is as strong as its vasanas. But where do the vasanas get their strength from? Only but from ego. That is, the vasanas have no strength of their own. Whatever strength the vasanas seem to have is strength we have given them. How do we give strength to the vasanas? By allowing ourselves to be swayed by vasanas. The more we allow ourselves to be swayed by any vasana, the stronger it becomes. The more we avoid being swayed by it, the more we don't allow ourselves to be swayed by it, the weaker it becomes. So, since the nature of vasanas is such, we cannot destroy vasanas all of a sudden. We need to slowly wean our mind off its vasanas. Why are vasanas so difficult to control? Because they're our own inclinations, our own likings. Why are we carried away by our vasanas? Because we like to be carried away by our vasanas, because our vasanas have a liking to be carried away. So it's a battle, as Bhagavan often said, the whole of the spiritual path is nothing but a battle fought within our own will. The battle between, on the one hand, the satvasana, the liking to just be as we actually are, to surrender ourselves. And on the other hand, all the Vishaya vasanas. Satvasana is one, Vishaya vasanas are many. But by the satvasana has been the seed of the satvasana is the seed of love, but has been sown in our heart by the grace of Bhagavan. So having sown that seed in our heart, he will nurture it and he will take care of it and he will ensure that it will grow into a big plant. But we have to do our part. How do we water the seed of that satvasana? By attending to ourselves. The more we attend to ourselves, the more we are allowing ourselves to be swayed by the satvasana, and so the stronger it becomes. And to the extent that the satvasana becomes strong, the Vishaya vasanas become weak. So we are all in the same position. This is what Akṣaramaṇamālai is all about. Because Bhagavan knows what is the struggle of being a spiritual aspirant. We are fighting against our own vasanas. This is not an easy battle to fight. So it's only by grace that we can win this battle. And that's what Akṣaramaṇamālai is all about. See the meaning of this verse we talked about today. Uneye matri odadu. That is, the nature of mind is to run outwards, constantly cheating on Arunachala. So that it doesn't run out, he needs to sit firmly on our mind. And the next verse is a continuation of the same idea. He says, Ursutralam, the mind which wanders about the world. The mind is constantly roaming about the world. That is not physically, but mentally the mind is thinking about things other than itself. That is what Bhagavan calls the mind roaming about the world. So that this mind that roams about this world, seeing you constantly, may subside. Or for the mind to subside, seeing you constantly, Unnaraheka, you show your beauty. So Arunachala has to reveal himself in our heart in order to draw our mind within. And so all the support is being given by Arunachala. It's Arunachala who, as Bhagavan said, grace is the beginning, the middle, and the end. It is grace that has drawn us to this path. Without grace, we would not have been attracted to this spiritual path at all. So it's grace that has drawn us to this path. It is grace that guides us on this path. It's grace that motivates us on this path, that gives us the strength and motivation to continue trying against this strong flood of outward going vasanas. He is giving us the love to try to swim against the current, to hold on to our being. So grace is the beginning, it's starting us on the path. It's the middle, it's what leads us along and motivates us on this path. And grace is the end. That is, finally, what will happen is grace will swallow us. And what is grace? Grace is our own real nature. Grace is Bhagavan. Grace is Arunachala. So it's all a matter of grace. But grace is playing its part. We need to cooperate by surrendering ourselves to grace, because grace is not something external to ourselves. It's the love that we, as we actually are, have for ourselves as we actually are. So we as ego need to cooperate with that by trying to turn our mind within. So if you complain about the strength of your vasanas, the fact that your mind is constantly going outwards, it is the same for every spiritual aspirant. No spiritual aspirant has succeeded in this path without going through this fight. In the case of Bhagavan, it seemed to be very easy. As a 16-year-old boy, he got a fear of death, and at once his mind turned within. But Bhagavan himself, when he was asked about this, he said, for those for whom it seems to happen effortlessly in the final birth, it's because in previous lives, they've done all the work that is necessary. So in previous lives, that jiva that was aware of itself, that soul, that ego that was aware of itself as I and Venkataraman, have been through all this. So it was an innuya, as Bhagavan describes it in verse 10 of Arunachala Patikam. It was a sweet soul. It was fully mature. So Arunachala, just by giving a small fear of death, he was able to swallow it. So, but that is because all the work could be done in previous lives. So Bhagavan said, nobody can get this without going through this struggle. This is not, Bhagavan said, birth control is not your mind, birth control is not your birthright. You have to work for it. So we have to be willing to, however many times our mind goes outwards, we need to try and turn it back within. We need to be constantly trying to surrender ourselves to him by holding on to our being. So there is no shortcut. This is the direct path. There's no means shorter than the direct path. The direct path is the shortest path. So this is the shortcut, turning back towards ourselves and trying to hold on to our own being more and more and more. This is the only way. And we cannot succeed in this path without putting in the hard work of however many times our mind goes outwards, we need to bring it back within and try to hold on to self-attentiveness. So the struggles you are going through is the struggles we're all going through. As Bhagavan makes so clear in these verses of Akṣaramaṇamālai. Akṣaramaṇamālai is a song all about this struggle, but we are all undergoing. So I hope that's an adequate answer to that question.
Okay, the next question. If the self or Arunachala can manifest in any form, if my Ishta Devata is Krishna and my Guru mantra is a Krishna mantra, can I recite this mantra whilst contemplating on Arunachala as the self or Krishna? Thank you.
Who is Krishna? What does Krishna say in the Gita? Aham Atma Gudakesha. I am Atma. So Krishna is that which is shining in us as I. So there's no difference between Arunachala and Krishna. They are just different names given to the one reality that is always shining in our heart as I. And what is the instruction given by Krishna in the Gita? There's a verse, I think it's chapter 6, verse 25 or so. Bhagavan, it's one of the verses Bhagavan has translated into Tamil. Yes, verse 25. The meaning of the verse is Dhiram se buddhinal. This is Bhagavan's translation. By a mind which is endowed with courage, with steadfastness. Chittate means the mind. Mella mella, slowly, slowly. In Sanskrit, Krishna says sane sane, gradually, gradually, slowly, slowly. Nera seya vendum nischalana, We have to make the mind slowly nischala. We need to slowly bring the mind to that state of motionlessness, that state of Arunachala, Achalatvam, nischala. Maratane means great charioteer, because Arjuna, though Krishna is the charioteer is Arjuna's charioteer. Arjuna is a charioteer in his own right because he's a great king, a great warrior. So that's why Bhagavan used this term. Maratane means great charioteer. And then Bhagavan's translation of the last two lines is Chittate Atma-bil Sertiduka. Fix the mind in yourself. Matreduvam Ittaneyam Ennidade. Do not think even in the slightest of anything else whatsoever. In the original Sanskrit, what Krishna says is Atma samstam manakritva. Make the mind fixed in yourself, in yourself. Na kinchit hapi chintayat. Do not think at all of anything else. So what Krishna is teaching us to do in Gita is exactly what Bhagavan is teaching us to do, to slowly bring the mind whose nature is to wander out. The next verse continues. Bhagavan translated the next verse, verse 26, also, which means the nature of the mind is ever unsteady. It's ever going outwards. But however much it goes outwards, we need to constantly bring it back within. So what Krishna is teaching us in Gita, of course, Krishna gives many teachings in Gita to suit many different people. But the essence of Gita is what he's teaching us in these verses, which is the practice of self-investigation, of turning our mind within. This is the direct path. Why? Because Krishna is that which is shining in our heart as ourself. So there is but that which appeared as Bhagavan Krishna is also that appeared as Bhagavan Ramana. They are one and the same. There's no difference at all. It's only because of our outward looking mind, we see different names and we see different forms and give them different names. So we see differences. But if we look within, we will see that Bhagavan Ramana, Bhagavan Krishna, Arunachala, all are one and the same. They are all that which is shiny in our heart as I. So if by repeating your Krishna mantra, you have come to Bhagavan, that means Krishna himself has sent you to Bhagavan in order to get you to follow this path. But Krishna had already taught you in the Gita. So there's no doubt, but following Bhagavan's path is following the ultimate path taught by Krishna. Krishna, because he's Krishna, he had to, in the Bhagavad Gita, he had to give so many teachings. He started off with the very highest Advaita teachings, but because Arjuna was not able to grasp, he came down and gave so many other teachings. So, on the pretext of teaching Arjuna, he has given teachings to all of us, teachings to suit us at different levels of our spiritual development. But ultimately, what is the ultimate path? It is turning our mind within, fixing it in ourselves and not thinking of anything else. Sunday, gradually. Atma samstam manakritva, fixing the mind in yourself. Na kinchit hapi chintaya, do not think of anything else.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's beautiful.
Okay, so the next question. I always feel that my spiritual state varies from time to time. Sometimes I'm overwhelmed with my vasanas, and it takes a while to return to my rather calm state. Also, I suffer from weak willpower. Do we need to do positive karma to help us turn within?
Firstly, our spiritual state is the one thing that never changes. Our spiritual state is our being. I am. That ever remains unchanging. What is changing is the mind. The very nature of the mind is to be constantly changing. So don't worry about the fickle nature of the mind. The mind is fickle by its very nature. It will constantly be going outwards. doesn't matter. However many times it goes outwards, what do we have to do? We have to bring it back within. Regarding having weak will, what is meant by weak will when we have contrary desires, when we now we are all in a situation, on the one hand, we want to go within, but on the other hand, we still have so much liking to go outwards. So because of our liking to go outwards, our love to turn within seems to be weak. That is what we call being weak-willed. Because we are not yet willing to let go of all our other desires and have wholehearted love for ourselves. But the only way to succeed is by constantly trying to turn within. Regarding karmas, we need not do any karmas. That Bhagavan's path is not a path of doing, it's a path of being, it's a path of surrendering. For those whose minds are very outward going, nishkarmiya karma is taught. That is doing action for the love of God and not for the fulfillment of any desires. That is good. Whatever, so long as we are, as we rise as ego, we take ourselves to be this body consisting of body, speech, and mind. And so we seem to be doing actions by mind, speech, and body. Whatever actions we do, we shouldn't be doing these for the fulfillment of our desires. We should do it, whatever we do, we should do it in a spirit of surrender to Bhagavan. Just for the love of Bhagavan, we do whatever our circumstances call upon us to do. But so if we act in that way, that will to some extent purify the mind. But now we've come to Bhagavan's path, this is something far more advanced than just doing nishkarmiya karma. This is the best nishkarmiya karma is meditating on God uninterruptedly, as Bhagavan says in verse 7 of Upadesha. Better than the actions of the nishkarmiya karma done by body. Nishkarmiya karma means the desireless action done for the love of God. The actions of that kind that we do by body is called puja. The actions that we do by speech is called japa. The actions that we do by mind is called dhyana. In this order, each one is more efficacious than the previous one. Efficacious means they're more effective in purifying the mind. So the best action we can do by mind is to meditate on God without interruption. However, in the next verse, verse 8, Bhagavan says, rather than meditating on God as something other than ourselves, as Anya, meditating on him as not other than ourselves, with the understanding that he is I, that is the best among all. But meditating on ourselves alone is not an action. So if we are meditating on God as something other than yourself, your attention is moving away from yourself towards that thought of God as something other than yourself. But when you recognize that God is that which is shining in your heart as I, and therefore meditate only on I, that is not an action. That is a cessation of action, because when we turn our attention back within, the mind thereby subsides and merges back into its source. So when we leave behind the Anya Bhava, taking God to be something other than ourselves, and recognize that God is nothing other than ourselves, and therefore meditate upon him as I alone, we are leaving behind action, and we are coming to the state of just being as we actually are. How can we be as we actually are? Only by holding on to our being, only by holding on to I am. So once we have come to Bhagavan's path, the karmas become, of course, body, speech, and mind will continue doing action, but that's no longer important. What's important is turning our mind back within and thereby surrendering ourselves to him. So don't worry about nishkarmiya karma. When you do actions, do it without desire for the fruit. But the main thing is not whether you're doing action with desire or without desire. The main thing is holding on to your being and thereby going beyond action. Bhagavan's path is not a path of doing, it's a path of being. And because our real nature is being, how can we attain our real nature? How can we know our real nature except by being as we actually are? So we need to We need to leave behind this doing. Doing is for the ego who takes this mind, speech, and body to be itself. When we come to Bhagavan's path, we are questioning the very existence of ego. I hope that is a helpful answer.
So the next question. Supreme bliss, Ananda, is our real nature. So why is dispassion for objects, vairagya, and withdrawing the mind recommended, and not rasavada, being simply aware of the essence of bliss in objects without attachment to them?
Because so long as our mind is going outwards, the happiness that we experience seems to come from the external objects. If you have desire for some external object, and when you get that, it seems to give you some pleasure, some happiness, but the happiness is not coming from that object. It's coming only from within you. But you cannot see that so long as you allow your mind to go outwards. So long as you're allowing your mind to go outwards, the happiness seems to be coming from the external things. So why vairagya is necessary? Because we need to stop allowing our mind to go outwards. So long as the mind is going outwards, ego is nourished and sustained by attending to things other than itself. So by allowing our mind to go outwards, we are feeding this ego. And ego is the fundamental ignorance that prevents us recognizing that happiness is our own real nature. So if you want to experience that rasavada, or whatever you say, you need to turn within, because that rasa, that happiness, that joy is only in your own heart. You can experience it as it is only by turning within. So long as you're allowing the mind to go outwards, whatever happiness you're enjoying is only a tiny fraction, a reflection of a tiny fraction of that infinite happiness that you actually are. So to experience the infinite happiness that you actually are, you need to turn your mind within. As Bhagavan says in the first sentence of Nana, that paragraph, first paragraph of Nana was not part of the original answers that Bhagavan gave to Srila Prakasham Pillai. When Bhagavan rewrote Nana as an essay, he added that first paragraph. And in the first sentence, he says, since all living beings like to be happy always, since everyone has the greatest love only for oneself, we all love ourselves more than we love any other thing, since happiness alone is the cause of love, why do we love ourselves? Because happiness is our real nature, is the implication. In order to attain that happiness, which is our own real nature, our own svabhava, which we experience daily in sleep, which is devoid of mind. In sleep, there is no mind. That means there's nothing else other than our own svabhava, our own nature. And in sleep, we are perfectly happy. Why? Because happiness is our real nature. So in the absence of all the external phenomena, we are perfectly happy in sleep. So in order to know that happiness, which is our own real nature, Tanne tan aridal vendam. Oneself, knowing oneself is necessary. Adaku, for that, nana ennum jnana vicharame mukhya sadhanam. For that, this jnana vichara, that means awareness investigation, who am I, is the principal means. So without turning within, we cannot experience the infinite happiness that we actually are. So rather than seeking happiness in things other than ourselves, we need to seek happiness in ourselves. In order to seek happiness in ourselves, we need to give up desire for all other things. So we need to be willing to surrender ourselves, to let go of all other things. That is why vairagya is absolutely essential. because the happiness we seem to have derived from external things is not real happiness at all. It's just a very faint reflection of the infinite happiness that we actually are. So we can never be satisfied by allowing the mind to go outwards. If we want to experience complete and absolute satisfaction, we need to turn back within. I hope that adequately answers that question.
Right, so the next question, not sure where I read this, but it may have been from Major Chadwick. He was saying that Bhagavan seemed unsympathetic towards people who were mentally ill. He would seem to completely lack interest and would talk to them as though they could snap out of it if they tried. The Major, or whoever it was who wrote this, said that it was a mystery to him that Bhagavan, who was normally loving towards just about everyone, had this one exception. What would be the explanation for Bhagavan's complete indifference to people who are mentally ill, or is this a false account?
Well, that is obviously a generalization. Just because, but how Bhagavan is equally loving to all. But what is the appropriate way of his expressing his love is he alone knows that. Sometimes in Bhagavan's presence, those who were closest to him, in the sense that those who were truly following his path, he would outwardly be he would seem to ignore them. He would seem to give more attention to those, to the less mature aspirant, those who want to chat about this and that and everything. He would seem to give more attention to them. He would seem to give less attention to those who are really following this path. Why is that? Because he's encouraging them to turn within. So we cannot tell from his outward behavior that we can't fathom his outward behavior, why he treats some in this way and others in that way. If sometimes he was seemingly indifferent to those who had mental health problems, and it's obviously a gross generalization, because there are so many stories of people who came to Bhagavan in great distress. There's a story about some person who had lost, I can't remember if it was a he or she, a man, they had lost their husband or wife and children and all their family they had lost somehow. They were bereaved, and they were in distraught with so much mental anguish. But when they came to Bhagavan, by merely being in Bhagavan's presence, they found the consolation that they couldn't find anywhere else. So Bhagavan's kindness is an infinite ocean. Nobody is excluded from Bhagavan's kindness. We cannot tell from his outward behavior how he is bestowing his kindness upon each one. It is true, ultimately, that is, nowadays it is said mental illness is caused by biochemical, by certain chemical, certain brain chemistry causes certain states of mind. That is the conclusion of modern science. But that is all we can say, but that is those scientists may have found a correlation between the chemistry of the brain and the state of mind of a person. But who is to say what is the cause and what is the effect? When you see two things are correlated, you can't, just because the brain is in a certain, the chemical state of the brain is in a certain condition, and there happens to be depression, you can't say the chemical condition of the brain is the cause of the depression. Why don't you say the depression is the cause of the chemical condition of the brain? So all you can fairly say is there is a correlation. You can't say which is the cause and which is the effect. Ultimately, the cause of everything is ego and its vasanas. So ultimately, we are all responsible for our own mind. A person who is mentally ill may have very strong vasanas that are so strong but they may seem to be unable to control their vasanas. But what are vasanas? Vasanas are our inclinations. It may seem very difficult for us to curb our inclinations, but inclinations are only inclinations. We are not bound to act according to our inclinations. When we act according to our inclinations, it's because we allow ourselves to be. So maybe if Bhagavan seemed to be indifferent to a certain person who was suffering from mental illness, ultimately the truth is we're all suffering from mental illness. Why? Because the mind itself is a disease. Mind is rising as ego. That is the root of all disease. That is the first disease. So there is no one who is in a mentally sound condition. The only mentally sound condition is manonasa, the state where there's no mind at all. Then, because the mind itself is a perversion, a distortion. We rise as ego or mind by taking ourselves to be what we are not, by taking ourselves to be this body. So we are all, in one form or other, we are all suffering from mental illness because the mind is itself an illness. But some people, the mental illness may seem to be more out of control than others. The reason for this is a mixture of their past vasanas and their destiny and so on. We cannot see the bigger picture. Bhagavan can see the bigger picture. So what is the appropriate way to treat each person? He is known only to him, and he does accordingly. And what if Chadwick wrote that? Yes, it is true. Ultimately, we each have the ability to snap out of it. It may seem to us that we cannot snap out of it, but we can at least begin to snap out of it by trying to turn our attention within. So though we may at times be in a state where we are unable to surrender ourselves, unable to turn our mind within, ultimately we are responsible. We can begin, at least we can pray to Bhagavan. We can begin to open our heart to grace, to recognizing our own weakness, our own inability, praying for the help that we all require. So it is wrong to think that just because Bhagavan outwardly seems to be indifferent, but inwardly he's indifferent. He is not indifferent to anything. He is the infinite ocean of compassion. He loves all of us as himself. But whereas we see ourselves as this small person, he doesn't see ourselves as this small person. He sees us as we actually are. So he loves us as we actually are. That is why he was equally kind and loving, both to the good people and to some of the people who came to Bhagavan were very, very bad people. I mean, it wasn't only saints around Bhagavan. All sorts of people came to Bhagavan with all sorts of past karmas and everything. But Bhagavan was kind to everyone. He was kind to those with very strong egos and those who were very humble. He was equally kind to everyone. His outward behavior may be different to different people, but the inner kindness, the inner love was the same for everyone. So it is a misunderstanding if someone generalizes and say Bhagavan is indifferent to all people who are suffering from mental illness. He may, in certain cases, have outwardly appeared indifferent, maybe because he wanted them to begin to take responsibility, to recognize that they have to, if you want to restore your mental health, which we can do ultimately only by destroying the mind, but at least to get ourselves back in a more balanced state of mind, we have to be willing to put in the work. So who knows? We can't understand these things. Bhagavan alone knows why he behaves as he behaves towards each particular individual. I hope that is an adequate answer to that question.
And I think, Michael, that's probably automatic so far as Bhagavan is concerned, because there's no personal interest. It just happens.
Of course, it's all automatic. As Bhagavan said, it's all a divine automatic activity, because Bhagavan has no doership. Bhagavan is bestowing his grace just by being as he is. So however he acted, however we see that person called Bhagavan acting outwardly, is what is the appropriate way for that outward form of Bhagavan to behave. But inwardly, Bhagavan is just being as he is, and his very being is infinite love. So what Chadwick has written, that's an interesting observation, but we shouldn't jump to a conclusion that Bhagavan is Bhagavan is indifferent to anyone. Bhagavan is not indifferent. Bhagavan is equally kind to everyone, though it may not always show outwardly. And we shouldn't come to a generalization that Bhagavan will treat all people who suffer from mental illness the same. Because, of course, there are so many different types of mental illness. It manifests in so many different forms. So we can't make generalizations like that. But the observation is an interesting observation. That's all we can do. But let us not jump to hasty conclusions.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Michael. It's a brilliant answer. Thank you.
Right.
And to some extent, we may draw a conclusion based on our own mental framework as well.
Exactly. We are all doing that. None of us know Bhagavan as he actually is. We are all seeing Bhagavan through our own colored glasses. That's why any reminiscences or any stories about Bhagavan, we have to take them with a pinch of salt, because we are seeing Bhagavan through the eyes of whoever is telling that reminiscence or telling that story. That's why sometimes when I first came to Ramanashram back in the 70s, there were still so many old devotees, many of whom had been with Bhagavan from Skandashram days or even Virupakshi days. So there were people who had been many, many years with Bhagavan. And sometimes you'd hear a story from one devotee. And when you mention the story to another devotee, they say, oh, no, it wasn't like that. I was there. It was like this. Two people, both were there at the time, both have completely different versions of the same story, because each is seeing Bhagavan's action through their own colored glasses, the colored glasses of our mind. So we need to take all these stories with a pinch of salt. We need to take all people's interpretations of these stories also with an even larger pinch of salt. But inevitably, when we tell a story, when we recount something that we remember from the past, we will be our interpretation of that story will inevitably be part of our storytelling. That's why stories get changed as they pass from one person to another. The stories the details of the stories, the interpretations of the stories change. So any story about Bhagavan, we need to we shouldn't just accept it as it is. We need to say that is how this particular person saw Bhagavan. That is not how Bhagavan actually is. If we want to know how Bhagavan actually is, we need to turn within and see how we actually are, because Bhagavan is what we actually are. So long as we see ourselves as a person, we cannot know Bhagavan as he actually is. Fortunately for us, though we cannot rely on the stories about Bhagavan, what we can rely on is his teachings, because he himself has written his teachings. So we need have no doubt about what his teachings are, because all the fundamental principles of his teachings can be found in his own original writings. So we need have no doubt about his teachings. About the stories about him, there's every reason for us to doubt the various different versions of the stories that we hear. But as Sadhguru used to say, Bhagavan didn't come just to be the subject of a story. Of course, we can learn a lot from the outward actions of Bhagavan, but that wasn't the main purpose of his life. He didn't come to be a subject of a story. He came to give us teachings, and those teachings are to be found in his original writings. If we want to understand Bhagavan, don't rely on the stories. Follow the teachings. Then only can you know Bhagavan as he really is, by knowing yourself as you really are.
Okay, so the next question is actually, it's in two parts. Well, there are two questions.
Okay, maybe if I answer one part at a time, otherwise I tend to forget.
No, but the second one is a very easy one to remember. I can promise.
Okay, but by that time I'll have forgotten the first one.
I read that the Ashtavakra Gita was one of Bhagavan's favorite texts. Did Bhagavan recommend any books for devotees to read outside of one's practice? And then the second thing is, what is the I thought and where is it located? So,
Okay. Firstly, people often say certain texts were favorite texts of Bhagavan. That is one thing that is often said, is that Ribhu Gita was a text that Bhagavan often recommended, and he recommended recitation of it. The central theme of Ribhu Gita is, I am not this body, I am Shiva, I am God, or I am Brahman, or whatever. It's said in so many different ways, but such texts are useful in the same way that in a kindergarten, learning the ABC and learning the times table is useful. We all had to go through kindergarten and learn the ABC and learn our times table and everything. At that stage, that is what is necessary. But we don't continue reciting A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and 1 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, etc. When we go to more advanced classes, once we've learned it, it's part of us. Then we go on to learn more advanced things. So a text like Ribhu Gita is a very good introductory textbook to Advaita. It teaches the basic principles of Advaita and it dims them in by repetition. So Bhagavan may have encouraged that for certain people, but that doesn't mean it's universally applicable. Bhagavan's own teachings are far deeper. Ashtavakra Gita is generally considered to be a much deeper text of, often people say it's the most advanced text of Advaita. It's telling the real heart of Advaita philosophy. But if you compare Ashtavakra Gita, for example, to Ludonapadu, which is a more useful text? Ludonapadu undoubtedly, but Ludonapadu is much deeper and much more practical. So for certain people, Bhagavan may have suggested you can read the text. That if someone knows Sanskrit, if they're interested in these things, he may say, okay, you read Ashtavakra Gita. But people are very keen to say, Bhagavan recommended this text, Bhagavan recommended that text. The truth is, if at all Bhagavan recommended anything, he recommended turn within, see yourself, be as you actually are. That is the heart of Bhagavan's teaching. These other texts are useful to the extent to which they help encourage us to turn within. But as far as I'm aware, I've not come across any text that can be compared in its practical value to the writings of Bhagavan. Works like Upadeshundya, Ludonapadu, Atma-vichara, Apalapatu, Nana. These texts are so practical, such useful texts, and they teach us all the basic philosophy in a very, very simple manner. A lot of these old texts, they unnecessarily complicate things, whereas Bhagavan keeps things very, very simple and very practical. And most useful of all are texts like what we're talking about now, Arunachala Akṣaramaṇamālai, because this is an applied textbook. This is when you actually begin to apply what Bhagavan has taught us in Nana, Ludonapadu, Upadeshundya, Atma-vichara, and so on. What are the practical difficulties you come across? That is what Akṣaramaṇamālai is talking about. So this is the deepest and most practical text of all. So when we've had the good fortune of being able to relish, at least to a certain extent, Bhagavan's works, all these older texts, even Ashtavakra Gita, pale in comparison. So for certain people, Bhagavan may have, maybe thinking that these people, knowing that these people were more ready to believe ancient texts than what he is saying, he may have encouraged them. Who knows? Who knows? But I personally wouldn't attach importance to all this, what people say, oh, Bhagavan recommended this text, Bhagavan recommended that text. He may, in certain circumstances, have recommended to certain people, but he didn't merely recommend Ludonapadu, he didn't merely recommend Akṣaramaṇamālai, he actually wrote them for us, for our benefit. So let us be benefited by his writings, rather than allowing our mind to go away to all these other things. Okay, someone has just asked a question, where can we find the book Ludonapadu? Ludonapadu is a very small book. It's a poem of just 40 verses, well, 42, because it's got 2 Mangalam verses. So it is a very brief but very compact text, full, all the principles that we need to know to follow the spiritual path are there in Ludonapadu. But it's a very deep, it's a very simple, but very deep and subtle text. So where it's available, there are many English translations. Unfortunately, most of them are not very satisfactory, because in order to translate Bhagavan, firstly the language is somewhat difficult, because Bhagavan wrote these poems in a classical style of Tamil literature, which even many Tamilians have difficulty in understanding. But more important than understanding the language is understanding the subject matter. If we don't have a deep and clear understanding of Bhagavan's teachings, it's very easy to misinterpret when we translate. And when we see translations of Ludonapadu, unfortunately, many of them are very imprecise translations, but many of them also misinterpret the text in very, very significant ways. So there are many translations, relatively few of them are good are really accurate translations, really conveying what Bhagavan meant. I have a translation, it's available on my blog. If you go to my website, happinessofbeing.com, in the sidebar you'll see a link to it. I have spent more than, I don't know how long it is now, 46 years now, I think, since I first came to Bhagavan. So I spent 46 years working on that translation, refining it gradually as time goes on, as my own understanding deepens. So I don't think you can find a more accurate translation. That is, it's accurate, and it's also conveying not only the meaning, because what's important in Bhagavan's works is not just the meaning of the verses, what is the implication? So I've done my best to bring out not only the meaning, but also the implication. So that you can find on my blog. As I say, there's a link to it in the sidebar of my website. It's not yet available in a book form. Maybe someday it will be, but if you want to have it in book form, you can copy and paste it, put it in a Word document and print it or whatever. But the translation is there for anyone who wants it. And I'm sorry to be blowing my own trumpet. I'm not blowing my own trumpet to say I'm a better translator than others. By Bhagavan's grace, I had a great good fortune of studying these works under the guidance of Sadhu Om. So I came to know what is the correct interpretation, how they have been misinterpreted by others. So that was a great blessing. And by Bhagavan's grace, I've been dwelling on this subject for the last 46 years. So I think I'm in as good a position as anyone to translate it into English, and I've done my best there. So I think you will find my translation. I'm not saying there's not room for improvement, but it's as good as I can make it so far.
So then the latter part of his question was, what is the I thought and where is it located?
Okay. you are the I thought. That is, I thought means ego. Ego is a thought. Why? Because Bhagavan explains the nature of ego in several verses of Ludonapadu. For example, in verse 24, he says, "But in sentient body does not say I." What he means there by body is not just the physical body. He's using the term body to refer to all the five sheaves. So the five sheaves is the physical form of the body, the prana or life, the mind, the intellect, and the will. These five he collectively calls body, and he says this is jada, and it does not say I. When he says it does not say I, he means it is not aware of itself as I, because it's jada. Jada means it's not aware. So it's not aware of itself as I. That's the first sentence. The second sentence is satchit udiyadu. The satchit means being awareness, does not rise. Then he says in the third sentence, in between, one thing I rises as the extent of a body. One thing I means one thing called I rises as the extent of a body. That what he refers to there as one thing I is ego, or the thought called I. And it rises as to the extent of a body. What he means is, since it rises, it's not satchit. Since it's I, since it's aware of itself as I, it is not the body. That's why he says it's in between. It's neither this nor that, but it's in between also in the sense that it partakes the properties of both. Like satchit, it's aware of itself as I. Like the body, it seems to be limited and it rises and subsides. So it borrows the properties of both. Like if there's a story in the newspaper, you read a story and you ask your friend, is this story true or not? If you're a bit doubtful about whether it's true, your friend may say, it's not true, it's not false, it's somewhere in between. What does that mean? It's neither entirely true, nor is it entirely false. It's got some elements of truth and some elements of fiction, such as ego. It's neither the body, nor is it satchit, but it borrows elements of both. And also it's in between in the sense, but the only link between satchit and the body is this ego. Ego is the go-between, so to speak. And then in the next verse, in the next sentence, he says about this one thing called I, he says, this is chit jada granti. Chit jada granti means, chit means awareness. It's referring to satchit, the pure being awareness. Jada means what is not aware. That's referring to the body. Granti means a knot. So when awareness seems to become entangled with the body, the resulting knot is this ego. That is, ego is the false awareness, I am this body. I am is the nature of satchit. Body is the body. So the I am is the chit element of ego. Body is the jada element. When these become entangled, when they're conflated together, when we take ourselves to be, I am this body, that is ego. That is the thought called I. So he says, this is chit jada granti, bandham. This is bondage. Why? Because we are bound to this body by taking it ourselves to be I. This is chit jada granti, bandham, jivan. This is jiva, the soul. Nupame, the subtle body. Ahande, ego. Ichhamsaram, this samsara. That is samsara. What is the root of samsara? It's nothing but this ego. For whom is samsara? Only for ego. So ego itself is the essence of samsara. And manam, it's mind. That is what the mind essentially is only ego. So this is, here Bhagavan is telling you what is I thought. That is why does he say it's a thought? Because the body is only a thought. So since ego is a mixture of what is real, namely satchit, the fundamental awareness I am, and this body, which is just a thought, that mixture of satchit and a thought is itself a thought. That is I am this body, the false awareness I am this body is a thought, but it's a thought unlike all other thoughts, because all other thoughts are jada. No other thought is aware of itself. But the thought called I, in Tamil he calls it nan enum ninevu. That means the thought called I. It is a thought. It's the thought that knows all other thoughts. That is, all other thoughts appear only in the view of ego. So ego, the I thought, is the subject. All other thoughts are objects. So what is the I thought? It is the subject, the knower of all objects. Where is it? Well, it's obviously not among objects, because all objects are anya. That's things that we know as something other than ourselves. Where is it? Where you are, there is the I thought. You are the I thought. That is, you as ego are the I thought. What you actually are is not the I thought, but just the fundamental awareness I am. So when we are investigating ourselves, we are turning our attention back towards ourselves. In Sanskrit, the I thought is called aham vritti. Vritti means, in this context, it means a mental modification, we can say. So the aham vritti means I thought. There's a portion in Maharsha's Gospel where someone is questioning Bhagavan about why self-investigation is the only effective means to bring about the annihilation of mind. And Bhagavan says, that person says, but ego can take so many forms. Bhagavan says, whatever forms the ego may take. That is, ego is actually a formless phantom, but ego identifies itself as this body, so it takes a form. So Bhagavan says, whatever form the ego may take doesn't matter. What ego essentially is the chit jada granti. It is this knot formed by the entanglement of chit and jada. So in your investigation into the source of the aham vritti, you take the essential chit aspect of ego. The essential chit aspect of ego means the I am portion. Ego is the mixed awareness. I am this person. I am Michael, or I am whoever. When I investigate myself, I'm not investigating Michael. I'm not investigating his body or his mind or the thoughts or the desires or the likes or dislikes or anything. I'm not investigating the person I seem to be. I'm investigating I. That is the I portion of the ego is what we are to investigate. Something I was going to say in that context. Oh, yeah. And he says there, in your investigation into the source of the aham vritti. So what does he mean by the source? Ego is the false awareness, I am this body. From where did this false awareness, I am this body, arise? It can only rise from the real awareness I am. That is, what exists without ever rising and subsiding is Sat Chit. Ego rises, where can it rise from? Only from Sat Chit, from what is permanent. In sleep, what exists is only I am, Sat Chit. When in waking and dream, we rise as ego. So from where have we risen? We have risen from that which alone exists in the absence of ego. That is I am. That is Sat Chit. So the source of the aham vritti is I am. That is the chit portion of aham vritti. So when Bhagavan says, in your investigation into the source of the aham vritti, you take the essential chit aspect. That essential chit aspect is I am, which is the source of ego, which is the source that he's referring to there. So we need not be concerned about the I thought as such. What we are to investigate is the essential I-ness in the I thought, that the I am portion. We are not investigating our rising, we're investigating our being. We're investigating the source from which this ego rises. That source is not a place in time or space, because time and space exist only in the view of ego. That source is our own being, I am. I hope this is an adequate answer to that question.
I think that's all the questions there are, but there is one comment that you might like to say something about.
And there's also Francis Bitterly, but I'll answer that comment and then I'll answer Francis Bitterly.
Okay. You also recommended The Path of Sri Ramana by Sadhu Om. The only copy I've seen of it for sale is on Amazon, and it's £100 plus. It seems there are very few copies published. That was just a comment.
Yeah, very. That is, it's out of print. It's been out of print for a while. A new edition is under preparation. It's nearly completed. That is the earlier translation was not such a good translation, and also was not a complete translation because more was added in Tamil after it was translated. So now a revised translation is coming out. It's still not a perfect translation, but it's a big improvement on the earlier translation. I think it's just in the final stages now. I think the only delay is the Bhakti chapter, which is a very big chapter. That is, I'm not quite sure at what stage that is, but I hope that's nearing completion. So I hope within the next 2 or 3 months, the new edition will come out, which will be a more complete edition and an improved translation. And that will become available on Amazon.
Oh, to be on Kindle or something like that?
Yes. I don't know whether a Kindle copy will be available immediately, but it's being published the hard copy is being published by Kindle, which is the Amazon publishing wing.
Okay, very good. You said there was one other thing you wanted to...
Oh, and Francis Bitterly has his hand up.
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi.
So the I am, which is this is an intellectual question, I'll confess, but staying in the I am is outside of self-inquiry is a wonderful, wonderful place to be. But my intellect continues to question that the self is beyond the luminous, boundless, eternal, unknowable self, indescribable self is beyond even this awareness of being conscious, the I am. So the I am is wonderful, and it's the portal. But what we are is the unborn. No, beyond prior to manifestation. The unknowing, eternal.
Yes, but that is
self.
I am means I exist. I am is our existence, our being. That is what you refer to as the beyond, what you refer to as the self. That is what is shining in the heart of each one of us as I am. When Bhagavan talks about I am, he's talking about our being, our fundamental awareness of our own existence. Nothing is beyond that. That alone is that is our real nature. That is what we actually are. There is nothing beyond that. And it is not unknowable. It is the one thing we always know. Bhagavan often used to say, if jnana were a knowledge to be newly attained. Sorry?
The I am is only here because of, the seed that was manifested.
No.
Out of the eternal unknowable, unmanifested.
I am is not. I am is the I am is Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi. I am is the name of God. I am that I am. God says in the Bible. I am refers to the ultimate reality. There is no reality beyond I am. Our own being here and now, that is Brahman. That is God. That is what we actually are. There's nothing beyond that. And it is unborn. There is never a moment when we are not aware of our own existence. So that I am is Sat Chit. Sat means being. Chit means awareness. I refers to our awareness. It's only what is aware is aware. I is the pronoun that refers to that which is aware. Am refers to our being. So I am is our being awareness, Sat Chit. That is the ultimate. There's nothing beyond that. You yourself are that. Tattvamasi. That is one only without a second. Anyone who tells you there's anything beyond that, how can you know anything beyond? I am is your very being.
See, I see the I am as the I am is the consciously embodied.
No, that is ego.
But was
that is Bhagavan clearly distinguished ego from our real nature. Our real nature is I am. Ego is the adjunct mixed awareness, I am Francis. So I am Francis is ego. The pure I am, bereft of Francis, that is your real nature. That is what you actually are.
Understood. But prior, before there was 4 years old of age, or before the birth of the seed for the body, the I am did not know itself. It was the eternal self.
I am
unmanifested.
What do you mean by unmanifested? The one thing, it is Swayam Prakasha, it's ever shining.
Didn't know itself.
That is what we actually are. Our being is its self-awareness. We are always aware of our own existence. In waking, the one thing that is constant throughout all our experience, in waking, dream and sleep, the one thing that is constant is this fundamental awareness I am. In waking and dream, we're aware of ourselves not just as I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this person, I am this body, and consequently we're aware of so many other things. In sleep, we're aware of ourselves as just I am, and therefore we're not aware of anything other than our own being. We're not aware of anything other than I am. So I am is the fundamental reality. As I say, I refers to Chit, Am refers to Sat, our being. So there's nothing beyond that. That Sat is Chit and Chit is Sat. That is what we actually are. And that is never unknown. That is the one thing that is always known. Because it is awareness. Awareness can never be unknown. Awareness always knows itself. It cannot be known as an object, but it always knows itself by its own light. That's why it's called Swayam Prakasa, self-shining. That alone is what is real. That alone is what is eternal. There's nothing prior to that. That's why Bhagavan said, Satchit Udiyadu. Satchit does not rise. That Satchit he's talking about is the fundamental awareness I am. What rises is ego, the mixed awareness I am Francis. Now you're aware of yourself as I am Francis. In dream, you're aware of yourself as I am Francis. In sleep, you're not aware of Francis at all. You're aware only I am. So that I am that is shining alone in sleep is shining even now. It shines eternally. That is the fundamental reality. There's nothing beyond that. That doesn't appear or disappear. It doesn't rise and subside. It's constant. It's eternal. It's unchanging.
But it didn't know it's.
It always knows. Do you not know yourself? It's very nature. Oh, can you say awareness doesn't know itself? Of course, awareness always knows itself. It is self-shining. It's not knowing itself as an object, but it is knowing itself just by being itself.
Well, it knows itself now because there's a body. But
and
before...
even to say it's not it, it's I. I know myself. That is the very nature of I, is always to know itself. The body is only when we rise as ego, when we mix ourselves with the body, all the other things manifest. Prior to the manifestation of ego, all that exists is the fundamental awareness I am. That is our being. That is the reality.
But 100 years ago, I didn't know I am.
When you say I there, you're referring to the person Francis, whom you now take to be I. Remove that Francis, and take the pure awareness I. That is what we are to investigate. If you investigate that fundamental awareness I am, you will find it is, as Bhagavan describes in verse 28 of Upadesh Undya, if one knows what the real nature of oneself is, then beginningless, anadi, infinite, ananta, undivided, unbroken, akanda, satchidananda. That is our real nature. That is I am. Anything other than I am is something other than yourself. You're not here to know anything other than yourself. Other things appear only when you rise as ego. What you actually are is only I am. And I am is ever knowing itself.
Did Ramana say that straight up?
Yes, yes. He said in so many ways he said it. He said, Jnanamam tane me. Oneself who is jnana alone is real. And he often referred to our real nature as irikarain. Irikarain means I am. It's our very being. Our being alone is what is real. What is unreal is ego and everything that appears. Ego and everything that appears in the view of ego, that is all unreal. What alone is real is that fundamental awareness I am. That is what Bhagavan's teachings are all about.
Thank you, Michael.
So if we begin to think there's something before that, then we're looking for something other than ourselves. What we are seeking to know is, who am I? Because there's nothing beyond I. I alone is what is real. And I am means I exist. So it's I and its existence are not two different things. Awareness and the awareness exists. So awareness and its existence are not two different things. I is the natural name of awareness. What is aware is always aware of itself as I. And Yaroslav, you've got your hand raised.
Just very quickly, Michael, before that,
Yes.
someone just put a very quick question which you can answer. Yes. Did Michael say that both parts of the path of Śrī Ramana are going to be published?
Yes, they'll both be published together.
Okay, yeah. Sure. Yeah, there's two hands. No, there's one.
No, well, Francis, have you finished your question, Francis?
Yes, Michael, I guess the mind was under the, I know it is the mind, but it's something that's unknowable prior to I am.
Anything that is unknowable is unreal.
You know, the unmanifested, you know, nothingness, if you will. I know
that is where so many different philosophies and so many, what is called the unmanifest, abhyakta, that is a Sankhya idea. But Prakriti was the original state of Prakriti was abhyakta, unmanifest. Only when Purusha appears on the scene, when Purusha comes in contact with Prakriti, does it become manifest. But this is a different philosophy. There's some, that is the useful insight of Sankhya philosophy. It made that fundamental distinction between subject and object, Purusha and Prakriti, the knower and what is known. Everything that is known is Prakriti, the knower is Purusha. That's as far as it goes. But the Advaita goes beyond that. It says everything that is known exists only in the view of the knower. And even the knower is not real, because the knower is ego. The fundamental awareness, I am, but underlies the knower. That is Brahman. That is the reality. So that which knows other things is ego. The reality of ego is the mixed awareness, I am this body. The reality of ego is only the fundamental awareness, I am. That is what we seek to know. That is what we actually are. But we seem to be unaware. Well, we're always aware that we are. We're always aware I am. What we are not aware of is what I am, because now we mistake ourselves to be I am Francis, or I am Michael, or I am whoever. So the problem lies in that false identification. Our being is real, our existence is real, our identification, our identity as this or that is unreal.
I'm good, Michael. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Right. Yaroslav?
Yeah.
Namaskaram, Michael.
Namaskaram.
Everybody. I've got one question now. In many accounts and stories about Bhagavan, I read that whoever came up to him with whatever question about religious practice, for example, like singing japas, mantras, or doing puja, or when Muslims came up to him and asked questions, or Christians, Bhagavan had never ever advised people to convert to Hinduism, for example, and whatever practice, religious or spiritual practice they were pursuing, he just advised them to continue doing that. Did he give those such advice because staying where you are, like philosophically or in religious terms, staying where you are is more conducive to self-investigation? Because if, for example, someone switches traditions, like some Orthodox Christian converts to Hinduism and starts doing pujas and worshipping Ganesha or Kali, that person would be more likely to pay and focus their attention on external things and just on images, on some external actions, rather than on internal things. Is this the reason why Bhagavan never advised anybody to change religion or even some spiritual practice?
We could say that is a reason, but that is not the main reason. What is Bhagavan's teachings? Bhagavan's teachings are, who am I? We are questioning what we actually are. The whole problem is ego. What is ego? It's a false identification. I am Yaroslav. I am Michael. I am British. I am Ukrainian. I am Indian. I'm American. I'm African. I'm Chinese. I am a Muslim. I'm a Christian. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I'm a Protestant. I'm a Orthodox. I'm Roman Catholic. I'm a Hindu. I'm a Vaishnavite. I'm a Shaivite. I'm following this philosophy or that philosophy. All of these are false identifications. As Bhagavan said, I am this or I am that is ego. But reality, the truth, is only I am. So if you change from being an Orthodox Christian to being a Hindu, you're just changing your identity. That isn't helping you to find out what you are. Bhagavan didn't consider any identity to be real. There was a devotee of Bhagavan called David McKeever. He actually was, though obviously his ancestry was British, but he was born and brought up in Bombay, and I think he lived all his life in India. Before he came to Bhagavan, he was originally a follower of the Theosophical Society. Then he became a follower of J. Krishnamurti, when J. Krishnamurti was the future Messiah. I think they called it the Order of the Star or something. So he was a follower of that. And then he continued being a follower of J. Krishnamurti when Krishnamurti broke away from the Theosophical Society. Then he came to Bhagavan. He was with Bhagavan for some time. Then he, one time he became a Sufi. one time when he later on he built a house near Ramanashram, but he often used to come and go. So once when he had been away for some time, one of my friends was actually there at the time. One tall and imposing looking man with a henna-dyed beard and long robes came into the ashram and bowed down and offered some dates and figs to Bhagavan. And Bhagavan looked at him with a smile and then looked around at other people, and seeing other people didn't recognize him, he said, "Do you not know who this is? This is our Makiva." Later, he went to Kashmir for a holiday. He was one summer in Kashmir. And when he came back from Kashmir, he was dressed as an Orthodox Brahmin with a sacred thread and Panchakacha dhoti and everything. And he came and he prostrated to Bhagavan and said, "Bhagavan, I've become a Hindu." Bhagavan simply looked at him and said, "Who has become what?" Because what is the use of changing identifications? What we are here, why we come to Bhagavan is not to become a Hindu or to become a Muslim or to become a Christian or to become anything. Our aim is to find out, who am I? The truth is, what we actually are is not Christian or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist or Jain or Sikh or Confucianist or Taoist or anything. It is not Ukrainian, it is not Russian, it is not European, it is not British or American or South American or African, or it is nothing. What we are is only I am. That is all that Bhagavan is concerned about. So Bhagavan didn't encourage us to change our identity. He encouraged us to give up our identity, give up all identities. The only real identity is I am I. We are nothing other than I. That is the truth. And we can find that only by turning our attention within. So changing our identity is irrelevant. That is the difference between spirituality and religion. In religion, you have an identity. I am a Christian, I am a Muslim, I am a Hindu. And also you have a set of beliefs. If you're a Christian, you have to believe this, this, and this. If you're a Muslim, you have to believe this, this, and this. If you're a Hindu, well, Hindus, you can believe anything and you're still a Hindu. There's so much choice within Hinduism. But generally, religions are about identity and about belief. Bhagavan challenges our very identity, asks us to question not only our identity, but everything that we believe. The most fundamental belief is I am this body. And consequently, we believe this world is true. And all other beliefs are built on these two fundamental beliefs. Bhagavan asks us to question all these things. So spirituality is not about identity. It's not about belief. It's about finding out the reality of that which has so many identities and so many beliefs. So the answer you gave, superficially, yes, that may be the case, but that's not the real reason. The real reason is Bhagavan didn't want us to merely change our identity. He never encouraged people. He never encouraged people to take sannyasa. But he also didn't encourage. He said, if it's your destiny to be a sannyasi, you'll be a sannyasi. If it's your destiny to be a grahastha, you'll be a grahastha. Grahastha means a family person. If you're destined to be married and to have X number of children, you'll be married and have X number of children. All these outward things, they're all according to destiny. So whether you're a sannyasi or you're a householder, whether you're a monk or a priest or a businessman or whatever it is, these are all false identities. What is real is only I am. That is what we need to investigate. That is what we need to know.
And so from this point of view, the very question or the very statement, for example, I am practitioner of this or I am practitioner of that, you have this adjunct, I am practitioner of this, and the question turns out to be wrong or like redundant. Yes.
Even to think I am a devotee of Bhagavan, I am a follower of Bhagavan, is false. Who am I? That is, if you're clinging to investigating what this I is, then only you're truly following Bhagavan. Then there won't be an I rising to say, I am a follower of Bhagavan, I am a devotee of Bhagavan. So even this identification we have to give up.
Thank you very much
Right.
for the answer.
Right.
Michael, there is one comment which I think is a question.
Yes.
We cling to only those things that seem to give us happiness, but why do I cling to my past mistakes? Because such clinging makes me miserable.
The mind is going outwards in search of happiness. It is very complicated. That is, once we rise as ego is complicated. As ego, we identify ourselves. We identify ourselves as this person. We identify ourselves also with our past. So if we've done mistakes in the past, we are identifying ourselves with those mistakes, and we are regretting. That is, when you're thinking about the past, your past mistakes, you're regretting. Oh, I wish I hadn't done that. If I hadn't done that, then I would be in a better position now. So it's indirectly your mind is seeking happiness. You're seeking happiness in how would it have been if I hadn't made that mistake? Then I would have been a better person. I would be happier. But whatever the mind may be going towards, that is, when the mind goes out towards the world, it experiences misery, Bhagavan says. When the mind goes toward, in the end of 14th paragraph of Nana, what Bhagavan says is, Jagam embadu Nineve, what is called the world is only thought. Jagam marayam podu, adavadu ninevatra podu, manam anandate anubhavikindradu. That when the world exists, that is when thoughts cease, the mind experiences happiness. Jagam tondram podu, adu dukkate anubhavikindradu. When the world appears, it experiences misery. So the very appearance of the world is misery. So, but why our mind keeps on going out towards the world? Out of all this misery that we experience in the world, we're still trying to squeeze some iotas of happiness. Because we are ignorant of our true nature, we are not aware, but we ourselves are happiness. So we assume that the happiness that we are seeking lies not in ourselves, but in other things. So we look for happiness outside. But the more the mind goes outward, the more it experiences misery. So why is your mind dwelling on your past mistakes? Because you're thinking, oh, if I hadn't done that, then I would be happier. This shows how foolish the mind is. Mind is foolish by its very nature because it's seeking happiness where happiness doesn't lie. Happiness does not lie in external things. Happiness lies only within. So Bhagavan says in that same paragraph, when the mind comes out, manam veliyil varam podu dukkate anubhavikindradu. When the mind comes out, it experiences misery. In truth, when our thoughts are fulfilled, that means when our desires are fulfilled, but it returns to its actual actual place, its own abode. It returns to itself, in other words, and experiences happiness. In the same way, in sleep, samadhi, and swoon, in times of sleep, samadhi, and swoon, and when things desired are attained, and when things disliked are removed, the mind becomes introverted and experiences happiness. Ipadi, Atma, leaving it in this way, leaving itself and going outwards, and then coming back within. Ceaselessly, the mind is wavering about, wandering about. Okay, sorry, I think the bit I was looking for, I think it was actually coming earlier. Yes, sorry. What he says, I'll begin from the beginning. He says, Sukham embadu Atma-vichara. What is called happiness is the very nature of ourself. Sukhamum Atma-sarupamum verandru. Happiness and the real nature of ourself are not different. Atma Sukham, that is the happiness that is ourself, alone exists. That alone is real. Prapanja porul ondrilavadu, Sukham embadu kidayadu. In not even a single thing, object of the world, is there any happiness. Or no, happiness is not to be attained in any of the things of the world. Abaigalilirandu sukum kidepadaha namadu abhivakatal ninikarom. We think that happiness is to be obtained by them only because of our abhivaka, our lack of discrimination. So that is the foolishness. What greater folly is there to look for happiness where happiness doesn't exist, and to ignore the place where happiness does exist. Happiness exists only within us. It's our own real nature, but we are constantly looking for it outside. This is the greatest folly. And we will even dwell on those thoughts that cause us misery, like the mistakes we've made in the past. Why are we thinking that? Because we were wishing, I wish I hadn't made that mistake. My life would have been so much better if I hadn't made that mistake. So indirectly, the mind is seeking happiness outside, and seeking happiness in the thought of what would have been if I hadn't made that mistake. But by seeking happiness outside, we are just courting misery. I hope that adequately answers that question.
Yes, sir, it does. It does answer. Thank you.
Okay, right.
So we have the final question at the moment. Does it mean that we are self-aware even in manolaya?
Yes. Awareness is your very nature. The very first question Shiv Prakashan Pillai asked Bhagavan is, who am I? And Bhagavan's answer was, Arive Nan, awareness alone is I. So how can awareness ever not be aware? We are always aware. And being aware means being aware of ourselves, because we can't be aware without being aware that we are aware. And being aware that we are aware implies being aware that we are. So that awareness I am is the fundamental awareness. We cannot be aware of anything else without being aware I am. But one thing that is constant, whether we're aware of other things or not, we are always aware I am. We're not aware of I am, because I am is not an object of awareness. We are just aware I am. That is the fundamental awareness. So that shines in all states, in both when the mind appears in waking and dream, and when it disappears in sleep or any other state of manolaya. The awareness is always there. The problem with manolaya is we go into manolaya by some means other than self-investigation. So in manolaya, the mind subsides. When the mind has subsided, what remains is the pure awareness I am. But in order for the mind to be destroyed, in order for ego to be destroyed, ego needs to experience itself as that pure awareness I am. So since in manolaya, take sleep. Sleep is a typical state of manolaya. In sleep, what happens in sleep? We are too tired to continue thinking, so we withdraw our attention from all other things. We subside in manolaya. Only after the mind has subsided in manolaya does pure awareness alone remain. Pure awareness was already there, but it remains alone only when the mind has subsided. But because the mind is absent, the mind is not destroyed thereby. If a court passes, supposing there's a court but passes judgment on a criminal, and the criminal is not present, the court may say, for the crimes this criminal has committed, we sentence him or her to execution, to death. But you can't carry out that death sentence unless the criminal is present. Likewise, we can't kill ego except in its presence. So ego will be destroyed only when ego sees itself as pure awareness. Ego is the false awareness, I am this body. When ego sees itself as pure awareness, in other words, when it sees itself as I am alone, it thereby ceases to be ego and remains as pure awareness. So ego is destroyed only by seeing itself as it actually is. It can see itself as it actually is only in waking and dream, because in Manolaya it's absent. That's why Manolaya, it's very pleasant to be in Manolaya. We all need to be in Manolaya for some time every day, or we become too tired. We can't continue functioning without subsiding in Manolaya in sleep for at least a few hours a day. But we don't make any spiritual progress by being in Manolaya. That's why Bhagavan never encouraged anyone to seek Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and why he taught that he told that story about the yogi who was adept at going into Nirvikalpa Samadhi and remained in Nirvikalpa Samadhi for 300 years at one time. And when he woke up, the first thought that had popped up in his mind was the last thought that was there before he went into Samadhi. Before going into Samadhi, he was feeling thirsty, so he asked his disciple to fetch water from the Ganga. But before the disciple could come back with the water, he again became immersed in Samadhi. And that time he was immersed in Samadhi so deeply, but he remained in that state for 300 years. So the disciple obviously had passed away. As Bhagavan told it very graphically, he said, in the meanwhile, even the Ganga had changed course. So the Ganga, which was nearby, was now a few miles away. And the village that had been there, that had also moved. So, but when he woke up after 300 years in Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the first thing he asked for angrily is, where's my water? So Bhagavan said, even the most superficial thought, the last thought in his mind before he went into Samadhi, was the first thought that popped up. So that means even most superficial thought is not eradicated by remaining 300 years in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. What about all the Vasanas? They will remain intact. Just like we cannot destroy Vasanas, no matter how long you may sleep for, no matter how long you may remain in Manolaya, you're not making any progress because you're not eradicating the Vasanas. We can eradicate the Vasanas only in waking and dream. When we rise as ego and are being pulled this way and that way by our Vasanas, we can weaken the Vasanas by not being swayed by them. We cannot weaken them when they're not functioning. In sleep, they're not functioning. So or in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, they're not functioning. So Manolaya is very pleasant state, but it's of no spiritual benefit. What we are seeking is not Manolaya, but Manonasa. Manonasa can be achieved only by seeing ourselves as we actually are, seeing what we actually are. What we actually are is pure awareness. Pure awareness means awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. So it's only by turning our attention back towards ourselves and thereby away from everything else, but we can be aware of ourselves as the pure awareness that we actually are. As soon as we as ego see ourselves as pure awareness, we cease to be ego and remain as pure awareness. That is the end. That is that is being swallowed by grace. That is what is called self-realization or enlightenment or moksha or nirvikalpa or sahaja nirvikalpa samadhi or nirvana, whatever you call it. That is alone your real state. That is turiya, the fourth, which is actually the only real state. But to achieve that, we need to see ourselves as we actually are. We can see ourselves as we actually are only by looking within. That is what Bhagavan's teachings are all about. Looking within to see who am I.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Seems a good place to end.
No, we've got one more hand raised.
Oh, yeah? I didn't see. Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. Oh, Champa. Is it Champa?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Michael, just a quick one. To differentiate between Nirvikalpa, Keval Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where there is laya,
Yes.
and the Sahaj Samadhi. Tell me, in Keval Nirvikalpa Samadhi, is that awareness of I am?
It is a state of Manolaya. In Manolaya, we are not aware of anything other than I am. But the difference between Manolaya and Manonasa, Manolaya, we come out of it again. Manonasa, we never come out of it again. Why do we come out of Manolaya? Because we go into it without knowing what we actually are. So to bring about Manonasa, which is what is called Sahaja Nirvikalpa Samadhi, we need to know what we actually are. We can know what we actually are only by turning our attention within. If you merely withdraw your attention from all other things, you subside in Manolaya. That's what happens every night when we fall asleep. We're too tired to continue thinking, so we withdraw our attention from all other things, we subside in Laya. Withdrawing our attention from other things is not sufficient. What is necessary is to focus our attention on ourselves, to focus our attention so keenly on ourselves, but it is thereby withdrawn from everything else. Then only will we experience ourselves as we actually are, and that is Manonasa. That is the achievement of our natural state of Sahaja. What Bhagavan generally referred to it just as our natural state, but because people use the word Samadhi, he said that is the Sahaja Samadhi, that is the natural Samadhi.
Yes, Michael, the difference between sleep and the Keval Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which ends up in Laya, yeah?
Yes.
In sleep, we are not at all aware of ourselves. We do not experience I am. We are unaware of I am. Even though I am exists, we are not aware of it.
Who is not aware of it?
But it's like a blank state, even though we exist.
This requires clarification. To the mind in waking and dream, sleep seems to be a blank state. Why? Because the mind was absent in sleep. But you were present, as I am. There is never a moment when we are not aware of ourselves as I am.
Yeah.
That is, the awareness I am is our real nature. So Bhagavan said, sleep is not a state of ignorance. It's not a state of darkness. It's a state of pure awareness. It's only, but the reason why it now seems to be a state of darkness, now we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are, because we're aware of ourselves as I am Champa, or I am Michael, or I am whoever. Because of this false identification, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. Because we are now not aware of ourselves as we actually are, we cannot recall what we were aware of in sleep, because what we were aware of in sleep is what we actually are. If we could clearly recall what we experienced in sleep, we would be that would be what we actually are now. Ego would be destroyed. So when we are practicing self-investigation, we are trying to experience here and now in this waking state the pure awareness that we experienced in sleep. But sometimes people ask, what is the difference between Nirvikalpa Samadhi and sleep?
Yeah.
Bhagavan sometimes said, according to the yogis, in Nirvikalpa Samadhi there is awareness, whereas in sleep there is no awareness. But Bhagavan clarified, that is because they go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi deliberately by means of their practices, so they're able to recognize the awareness that exists in sleep. So in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, they cannot recognize the awareness that exists in sleep.
Yeah.
But exactly the same awareness is there in sleep, but is there in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. All differences appear only in the view of the mind. Since the mind is absent in Laya, there cannot be any difference between one state of Laya and another state of Laya. The differences appear. The difference between Nirvikalpa Samadhi and sleep appears to the mind in waking and dream. So from the perspective of the yogi feels, I was aware in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, I was not aware in sleep. That shows their ignorance. Because if they actually knew what they were, they would recognize that same awareness that they recollect experiencing in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, they were experiencing exactly the same in sleep. So this path of yoga, the furthest it can go is to lead to Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which is a state of Manolaya. That's why Bhagavan said in verse 13 of Upadeshundya, Bhagavan says, dissolution of mind is of two kinds, laya and nasa. That which is dissolved in laya will rise again. That which is dissolved in nasa, that when its form dies, it will not rise again. Then in verse 14, he says, the mind that is subdued or curbed by breath restraint, only if that mind is sent on the Aurvari, the path of investigation, will its form die. So what Bhagavan is implying there is for the yogis, before they allow the mind to subside in Manolaya, that is, by their pranayama and other practices, they can calm down the mind. But they shouldn't let it go so far that it goes into Manolaya, because they can't make any progress then. Before subsiding in Laya, they need to turn their attention back within to find out who am I. Only by investigating who am I will the mind die. That's what Bhagavan says. Ullate Aurvari vidakave undipara viyam adonuru undipara. Only if it is sent on that path of investigation will its form die. So the yoga can take you only so far. If you want to go from yoga to manonasa, you need to turn the mind back within. There is no shortcut. There's no way around it. We have to turn our mind within. We have to see ourselves as we actually are. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 44 of Akṣaramaṇamālai, what did Bhagavan learn from Arunachala? Arunachala teaches in silence, but what Arunachala taught Bhagavan in silence, he expressed to us in words. In verse 44 of Akṣaramaṇamālai, he says, Tirambiyaham, turning within, Tane dinam aha kankan, daily see yourself with the inner eye. That means the eye of attention, the inner eye of attention. Teriyam, it will be known. Endranaya Arunachala, thus you told me my Arunachala, or thus you told me, what a wonder.
Yes.
So that is the only way. There is no other way.
My difficulty is how to destroy the mind, one, and how to recognize that we are not slipping into laya.
If your mind dissolves in a state like sleep and comes out again, that is manolaya.
Okay.
But you can subside in manolaya only if you lose your hold on self-attentiveness. By holding on to self-attentiveness, we are remaining balanced between, that is, if we allow our attention to be diverted by vasanas, we get carried away by thoughts. If we allow our attention to be, if we lose our attention and slip into sleep, that is, there are two ways we can lose our hold on self-attentiveness. If you hold on to self-attentiveness, you are then remaining balanced between thoughts on one hand and sleep on the other. You're neither slipping into thoughts, nor are you slipping into sleep. That is the unique efficacy of this path. That is why this is actually the true samadhi, because one meaning of the word samadhi is samadhi. It's a balanced state of mind. So that state where we are remaining balanced in the state of self-attentiveness, not allowing ourselves to be carried away by vasanas into thoughts, or not allowing ourselves to be carried away by drowsiness, by pramada into sleep, we hold on to just that self-attentiveness. That is what Bhagavan calls the practice of Sahaja Samadhi. That practice of Sahaja Samadhi alone will lead to the ultimate Sahaja Samadhi, which is, that is, Sahaja Samadhi becomes permanent when the mind is destroyed. It is destroyed only by this practice of holding on to self-attentiveness. So,
But we are aware.
Sorry, you say.
Yeah, we are aware of I amness in a lower state, yeah?
Yes, you never cease to be aware of your own existence. I am is your fundamental awareness. That is what you actually are. So that can never be absent. But in order to bring about the destruction of the mind, all you need to do is to hold on to that fundamental awareness I am. So long as you're holding on to that fundamental awareness I am, you can forget about thoughts, forget about layer. You need not worry about thoughts or layer. All you need to be concerned about is holding on to I am. If you begin to think about thoughts, your attention has gone away from yourself. If you begin to think, how can I avoid layer? Your attention has gone away from yourself. Just hold on to I am. That will lead you beyond layer to nasa.
You answered it very well. Hold on to
This is not my answer. This is Bhagavan's answer. Yeah. Bhagavan says, Vida pidi Sarupa Dhyanate Vida pidi pidika vendam. That means tenaciously, unfailingly hold on to Swarupa Dhyana. That is meditation on your own real nature. That means self-attentiveness. Hold on to that awareness I am. That is the only way. Yeah. That is Bhagavan's path. It's actually so simple. But the problem is we have so much liking to go outwards. So it requires persistent practice. But the practice itself is very easy. It seems difficult because our mind keeps on jumping outwards. But all we need to do, doesn't matter how many times our mind jumps outwards, we bring it back in. We bring it back again. We bring it back again. We bring it back again. That is the practice. And the more we bring it back, the weaker those outward going vasanas, Vishaya vasanas will become. And the greater the love to be as we actually are will grow. That is the Sakvasana. So there cannot be a simpler path than the path Bhagavan has shown us.
Yep. Thank you, Michael. You're one.
All thanks to Bhagavan. I'm innocent. I'm innocent. I'm a postman who brings you post in the morning. You don't say thank you to the postman because you got a good news in the letter. It's this is all Bhagavan's teaching. I'm just saying what Bhagavan has taught us.
Yeah. So what I understand is keep holding on to I am.
That's all.
Yes.
From beginning to end, that is Bhagavan's path.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
What is this I? Who am I? That is what we need to hold on to that. It doesn't mean asking the question, who am I, or asking the question, what am I? It means holding on to I to find out what we actually are.
Yeah.
Bhagavan says, investigate who am I, find out who am I, see who am I. So we need to see what we actually are. We can do that only by holding on to I am. In one verse in Guru Vachakukavai, he said, cling to that like an udumbu. An udumbu is a type of lizard, but can hold, it's got suction pads. When it climbs up a wall, it holds so fast to the wall, you can hold on to that lizard and you can lift yourself up. It's holding so fast. So we need to hold so fast to that fundamental awareness I am. That's all.
Yes.
That is the simple path Bhagavan has given us. Simple and infallible, unfailing. This cannot fail. That's why he said to Akilanda Maya, who was a simple, uneducated village woman, when she asked him for some teaching, or she didn't even ask him, when she was thinking of asking him and was feeling shy, he said to her, Unne vidamal iru. That means be without leaving or without letting go of yourself. That is Bhagavan's path.
Got it. Thank you. I know you said no thank you to you, but still.
Yeah, well, okay, I may pass it through me to Bhagavan.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Akṣaramaṇamālai.
Wait, hang on, there's a new message actually. Let me just check.
Oh,
No, it's thank yous.
okay, yes.
The string of thank yous.
Right. Well, that's all Bhagavan's department, not my department.
Yeah.